Hello, beautiful people. It's Lulu. Welcome to the Lulu SE podcast, where we do things differently. No editing, no polishing, no studio magic, just honest conversations that stay exactly as they happened. Hey, beautiful people. Wow, what a week. You know that moment right after you've shared something really important, something close to your heart, and then you start overthinking it, start judging it, poking holes in it. Well, that's exactly what happened after our last episode about the success paradox and how it's such an inside job. There I was, listening back to the episode, judge and jury in action. And I catch myself doing the very thing I had just spent over 20 minutes talking about. Waiting to feel good enough by achieving the perfect episode. Only this time, I was waiting to feel good enough about an episode about not waiting to feel good enough. Crazy, right? And that's when it hit me. This right here is the perfect example of what we need to talk about today. Because here's what nobody's telling us about personal development. Sometimes all this growth content, all these podcasts, books, social media posts, workshops, sometimes all of this stuff can make us feel like we're doing life wrong, like we need to fix ourselves, like we're somehow behind. And yes, it can all make us feel like we're not good enough. But what if I told you that this feeling of needing to fix ourselves is exactly what's standing in our way? What if our real power lies not in perfecting ourselves and our lives, but in truly living it? The messy, the awkward, the uncomfortable, all of it, just living it. Today we're taking an honest look at what happens when personal growth gets personal. We're going to explore why rushing to fix ourselves actually slows down our progress, and how to create real, sustainable growth through self-love. No filter, no perfect solutions, just real heart talk about what it actually looks like to live these principles we're learning together. How to live this stuff when the podcast is not playing and the books are closed, the workshops have ended, and your Insta feed is not running. How do you do it? Well, here's the thing about personal development. We dive in because we want to grow. We want to evolve. We want to become better versions of ourselves. We want to do better, have more, become more. And there's nothing wrong with that. But somewhere along the way, it can start to feel like an endless chase. We are collecting tools, strategies, frameworks, all these pieces that are supposed to help us fix what is broken. I see it all the time. I see it with myself. We finish one book, and before we've even implemented what we've learned, we're already reaching for the next one. We hear one podcast episode about morning routines, and suddenly our perfectly good morning doesn't feel good enough anymore. Sound familiar to you? And this is where it gets real and raw. This is not your fault. We've been conditioned to believe that if we're not constantly working on ourselves, constantly improving, constantly fixing, then we're somehow falling behind. We're somehow failing at a good life. It's like we're all running on this personal development treadmill, getting more exhausted, but not actually getting where we want to go. Remember in the last episode when I talked to you about the success paradox, about how we often chase success thinking it will make us love ourselves, when it's actually self-love that creates the foundation for genuine success. Remember that? Well, the same thing happens with personal development. We chase growth, thinking it will make us feel whole, when actually accepting ourselves as we are, all the gloriously messy parts of ourselves, it's that acceptance that creates the space for real growth. Let me make this really practical and real for you. When I caught myself critiquing episode 4, and the truth is, it started with small critiques. And then before I knew it, I was in a tsunami of that is so fucking confusing and downright bad. Yeah, that's what I found myself doing. And my first instinct was to rush and fix the message, to immediately start planning how I could make it better. But here's what's crazy. That fixing energy that I know so well, that rushing to improve, it actually clouded my ability to see what worked in that episode and what didn't. And there's a lot that did work. It wasn't until I stepped back and chose self-compassion first that I could see things clearly. This is what I mean when I talk about the success paradox. This isn't just some theory. This is real life, everyday life. This is what happens when we choose love first, when we choose ourselves first, when we choose acceptance first. Not because we're giving up on growth, but because we're choosing a more powerful path to it. And I need to say that again. Not because we're giving up on growth, but because we're choosing a more powerful path to it. So what does choosing this more powerful path actually look like? Let me show you how this played out for me, because this is what loving ourselves looks like in action, in the real world. When I first realized that episode 4 wasn't as clear as I wanted it to be, that the success paradox and the LOVE framework got a bit tangled up and fuzzy, I had a choice to make. I could either continue beating myself up about it and rush to fix everything, or I could use this as an opportunity to actually live what I teach. And this is the truth of how I have come to all the material that I offer you. I live it every single day. And this is where it got really interesting, because I realized I could use the LOVE framework, not just as something I talk about, but as my own way through this moment. I mean, I'd used it before. That's how I came up with it. And now it was time to use it again. So let me break this down for you. L, the L of love. First, I had to listen, really listen to what was happening in my head. Not just the surface criticism about the episode, but the deeper stuff, the stuff that's harder to listen to. The stuff that goes something like, "You're not good enough to do this. Who do you think you are teaching this?" Who do you think you are to have a podcast? Do you know that voice? Well, instead of just trying to shut it down or push it away, I just noticed it. That's all. Just noticed, just listened. And then came the really tricky bit, the O in the LOVE framework, own your worth. Right here, right now, messy podcast and all. This isn't about pretending the episode was perfect. It's about knowing that my worth, your worth, isn't tied to how perfectly we do something the first time around, how perfectly we express ourselves, or how clearly we teach something the very first time we've done it. And this is where the success paradox really came to life for me. In the V of the LOVE framework, value your journey. Instead of seeing episode 4's imperfections as failures, I started seeing them as the exact stepping stones we needed in order to have this conversation today. Crazy, right? The very thing I was beating myself up about became the perfect example of what I'm trying to teach, of what I'm trying to communicate. And finally, yep, you guessed it, this is my favorite part, the E of the LOVE framework, embrace imperfect action. Not just talk about embracing it, but actually goddamn doing it. By showing up today, having this conversation with you, being real about my own messy, imperfect journey with these concepts. And here's what I've learned. When we choose love first, when we start from acceptance rather than criticism, something major shifts. We can see much more clearly. We can learn more deeply. We can grow more honestly. Not because we're pushing ourselves harder, but because we are creating the space for real transformation. Think about it. What if every mistake, so-called, or unclear moment, or not quite right situation in your life isn't actually a failure? What if it's just feedback, just information? I mean, let's not even use the word feedback. Let's just say information. Just part of your path, part of my path. What if, and this is a biggie, what if those moments are actually invitations to practice loving ourselves more, not reasons to love ourselves less? And this is where we need to talk about something that might just change everything for you. Because there's a deeper truth here about why rushing to fix ourselves actually slows down our growth. Let's think about it. When we're in fix-it mode, what's really driving us? When I'm so driven to fix myself, what's really driving me? It's fear. Fear that we're not enough. Fear that we're falling behind. Fear that we're somehow doing life wrong. And my life has shown me over and over again, when fear is running the show, or the shit show, more like it, we can't see clearly. We're so focused on what's right that we miss what's working. And trust me, there is a lot that is working. We get so caught up in being better that we lose touch with who we are right now. And who we are right now is pretty darn fabulous. And we deserve to see that. Can it be better? Always. And that's life. And that's the beautiful part of this journey. When we choose love first, I mean really choose it, not just talk about it, something completely different happens. We create this space, this breathing room where we can look at ourselves honestly and kindly, where we can say, okay, that didn't quite work the way I wanted it to, without adding, and that means I'm a failure, or that means I'm not good enough. I see this with my clients all the time. I see it in myself. I live it. When we're constantly trying to fix ourselves, we're actually reinforcing the belief that we're broken, and we are not broken. But when we start from a place of, I'm okay, and I want to grow, that's when real transformation happens. That's the magic right there, baby. And I want to be crystal clear about this point, so please listen. This isn't about lowering our standards or settling for less or being okay with being mediocre. No, it's not about that at all. It's actually about creating the conditions, the environment for real growth. Because when you're not burning all your energy on self-judgment, on self-criticism, on self-loathing, you have so much more available for actual growth, the stuff that you want. And it's a lot more fun this way. It's so much more joyful and not so goddamn serious. It's like what happened with episode 4. The moment I stopped trying to fix myself and fix the message and instead chose to love myself through the process, I could actually see what needed clarity. I could see where the success paradox got a bit fuzzy and where the LOVE framework needed more real life examples. Not because I was broken or the message was broken, but because I'm in the process of growing. We are all growing. And right now, being December, with all the pressures of end of the year and assessing how well we did in 2024, and this one can be really tricky, so be mindful of this one. And of course, the holidays are coming up. All of this becomes even more important. There's no better time to practice choosing love first than when we're surrounded by all the pressures on our time, on our money, on our relationships, and all the outrageous expectations that come with this holiday season. Okay, so I'm going to make this hyper practical in the time that we have left. How do we actually catch ourselves when we're in that fix-it mode and shift into self-love mode instead? How do we do it? Well, here's what works for me, and I invite you to try it. When you catch that inner critic having a party in your head and just ripping you apart, or maybe not such a big party, but that voice is just making you doubt yourself and question yourself, pause. Just pause. Take a breath and ask yourself this one simple question. Would I talk to someone I love this way? Would I talk to someone I love this way? That's it. That's all you have to do. That's your entry point to shifting from fear to love. Because of most of the time, the answer to that question is a big fat no. And in that moment of recognition, you have a choice. You can choose a kinder thought. Not the kindest thought ever, because that might feel fake to you. Just a little kinder. And here's an extra bonus. Pay attention to what actually moves you forward. When do you feel more creative, more inspired, more energized, more capable, more willing to try new things? Is it when you're beating yourself up or when you're coming from a place of self-love? Be mindful, be curious, stay open. And as we wrap up today, I want to leave you with this. The success paradox isn't just some fancy sounding theory. It's a whole different way of moving through life. Every time you choose love over criticism, acceptance over judgment, you're not just being kinder to yourself. You're actually creating the conditions for real, sustainable, beautiful growth. And this week, I invite you to notice one moment each day where you catch yourself in fix-it mode. Just notice it. Don't judge it, just notice. And please, if this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who you think will enjoy it. I'd love to create a community where we celebrate progress over perfection, where we choose love first. Tag me in your stories if you share. I would so love to hear what hit home for you. Let me know. You can reach out to me on my Instagram page or my website, luluessie.com. And before I go, for those of you who are feeling overwhelmed, not enough, and like you're struggling to keep your head above water for whatever reason, my arms are wrapped around you, big time. And finally, what comes from the heart reaches the heart. And today, like every day, this comes straight from my heart to yours.